And I got to get up. Howard morning. Beautiful skies. Beautiful conditions. See if anybody's bored right now. Not the normal time to jump in here, but we'll see what happens. I got nobody. Beautiful skies tonight. At least the temperature dropped. I had to use my air conditioner last night. It was like high 70s, doable. I tried to go to bed and the humidity took off. So I tried to lay there in the fan, wasn't working, had to get up and hook up the generator, get the air conditioner plugged in, and get all everything set. Got that running. And then you got to run the air conditioner for like 3 minutes before the compressor hits. And once the compressor hits is when it starts cooling the place down. Until then, it's hot. So that was my frustration for last night. On the upside, oh, hey, whoa, I got bodies on you. All right. Hey, uh, I like to call this segment Expediting America. I just dropped my load at 5:30 here in the middle of nowhere, kind of by Louisville. And it's horrible to not have a load for the weekend. So as soon as I dropped my load, I got back on the board, and I was number 5 of 5, meaning there were 5 other drivers in the relatively local area waiting for stuff. And then that means you're going to get stuck for an entire weekend, and that's like the fate worse than death. Now, technically, expediting is a 24-hour day operation. It's just getting loads on weekends can get wishy-washy, especially depending on where you are. But I was in a fairly good area. So I called dispatch and said, hey, what do I got to do? Which way do I got to go? What do I have to do to get a load? I don't want to spend Saturday and Sunday laying on the ground staring at the sky. And they said, the lady told me, dispatcher said, she has 4 loads coming out of Antioch, Tennessee. I went, really? It's about 130 miles from where I am. She goes, they're being delivered to South Carolina, and I'm trying to scrape together enough people to be close enough to take the loads, and they're spread out during the day. I went, okay, I'm listening. They have a load picking up at 5, and they got one at like 11 o'clock, 5 in the morning, and one like 11 o'clock. And this is on Sunday. And I said, oh, put me on that. She was very happy. It's 2 pallets, 2,500 pounds, which is pretty much the capacity of my van. But what's cool is it's on Sunday, and it's a direct delivery, a little under 400 miles. And any deliveries you get done and get in the done category by midnight on Sunday go on next Friday's paycheck. So that worked out really, really well. And apparently they were desperate enough to pay me not only, loaded miles, but empty miles. So I'm making paid for every mile I have to drive. So that makes this a very valuable load for this weekend. So this worked out really good. I've never had that happen before, but if you ever have a dispatcher say, we're trying to find people to carry a bunch of loads in a particular area, they're scrambling, and they're going to be real generous paying you. So instead of giving you the little $25 or $50 stipend to get you there. I'm actually getting paid mile for mile to go down there. So this is working out pretty well. My favorite setup is to get a load on a Friday, delivered on a Monday, and it could be 300 miles away or 1,000 miles away. So you kind of stroll and take your time and smell the roses. So my plan for tomorrow is to go to see if I can find a museum somewhere to go look at. I like military museums and aviation museums. One of the best places to get driving all night long is the Toledo to Detroit in that little corridor. There's a bunch of little manufacturers within about 100 plus miles or so of Detroit that make components they need. And I had one experience. I got caught in caught in a loop from a place south of Toledo to Detroit, which is the run was about 90 miles. And I would take on a load, go up to Detroit, 90 miles, drop it, drive straight back, and then wait for the next one. And I was making $200 a round trip to do that. And I did it, I think, 3 times that night, just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It was pretty cool because there's a reasonably priced gas station right there in Toledo that I hit. But right now, I am heading back down this highway. I don't even know what highway this is. I'm heading westbound technically. And I'm trying to get to the interstate to get back down by Nashville so I can pack and spend the night. And tomorrow, since I got nothing going on tomorrow and I know I'm not going to get a call, I can go ahead and see if I can find a museum to go hang out with. Where? What? You're asking me where? Where am I going? Ultimately, tomorrow I pick up Sunday morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, local. I pick up in Antioch, Tennessee. That's my pickup, and I don't even know what road this is. I'm on the it's a parkway here, the Wendell H. Ford Western Kentucky Parkway. I'm on the Bluegrass Parkway. That's what the sign just said. I am currently westbound on the Bluegrass Parkway here in Kentucky, and I'm gonna probably stop somewhere near Nashville because, like I said, tomorrow the museum's gonna be my how I'm gonna occupy my Saturday. And I gotta buy. I have a lot of electronic stuff. What country is this? Wow. I'm in the United States, and this is Kentucky. So over on the eastern side of the United States, my it says I'm going westbound on this again Bluegrass Parkway. I don't know the name of it. And that sign says Elizabethtown is 8 miles in front of me. I'm not real familiar with this area. State Kentucky. Where are you? Where are you jumping on here from? Out of curiosity. I had a guy in here from India looking at some of the terrain, and he was taken aback by it because apparently India looks totally different, and I've never been there, so I don't know what he's looking at. But yeah, your name I can't even begin to pronounce that. But yeah, but what country are you from? Well, the core area for this kind of work for expediting is the northeast part of the country. And this is getting back into it and taking me back out of it. South Carolina is a pretty good area also. The Carolinas, Missouri, Mississippi, Alabama, yeah, a little bit. But this is worth this just to get this weekend thing. Because if I didn't take this, I'd be sitting up here twiddling my thumbs. Tell you what, when you're out here not doing anything for a weekend, it blows. And you're trying not to spend money, so you can't let you go goof off or anything. But again, museums are my objective. So I am and I'm heading southwestbound towards Elizabethtown, Kentucky, and I'm going to hit 65, Interstate 65, and follow that. I'm playing with the GPS here. It's like I go, yep, down past Bowling Green, keep going, keep going, keep going into Nashville. I'm heading towards Nashville, so I'm going to stop somewhere north of Nashville, spend the night. Uh, I always have some weird topic to talk about in here. And the one that pops into my head right now is an airplane that was used during World War II called the PBY Catalina. And it was a reconnaissance plane, had the high wing twin engine, and it was a seaplane. There were two models of it. One was a flying boat. It had to have water under to take off and land. And a slightly more complicated model was called the amphibian because it had landing gear that could literally pop out of the belly so it could take off and land in a runway, and then it could retract the gear. Obviously, the flying boat version was cheaper to build and lighter, but the amphibian was more versatile. And I didn't realize this, but that plane went operational in 1935. A lot of the very successful aircraft of World War II were developed during the war, during wartime hurry-up standards, and the technology kind of exploded during the war, from pre-war planes, fighter planes, for instance, to fighter planes that were later in the war is night and day difference. Well, this was a design feature. They asked for a long-range reconnaissance aircraft, and they came up with Catalina, and it went operational in 1935. So that's extremely early for what it was capable of doing. It. Everybody around the world wanted them. If you've ever seen one, if you Google a picture of the PBY, capital PBY, it's those three letters that hit images, you'll see what I'm talking about. It had pontoons that had a high wing, two engines, radial Wasp engines, and had pontoons out on the wingtip. So once it took off, they folded those up, and they were actually part of the wing. So it was quick. It had the cockpit in the front. The post that held the wing was right in the middle. It went up above the fuselage, and if you look at it, there's a set of windows on either side of it. And the engineer, which is the mechanic, was sitting there, keep an eye on the situation. You had your two pilots. You also had an observer that was actually down below the pilots in front of them. And on either side, there were these two, they called them blister windows, these big bubbles that stuck out the side that folded open and closed for visibility. And if outfitted properly, those planes could fly for 20 hours on internal fuel load. And in some cases, they would land in a lagoon somewhere and take on fuel from a submarine or a small ship and continue their missions. But they had a need for a long-range reconnaissance aircraft in the South Pacific, and that's what they came up with. And everybody and their brother wanted them. And I mean, a few years ago, the wife and I watched a documentary about them. And this is back when the wings of the plane were made of cloth. They literally sewed the wings together. And the demand for the aircraft was extremely high, and they were making them in Southern California. And there was this huge plant which they expanded. No, number two said hi. Oh, okay, hi. We are in Kentucky, going westbound on the quote-unquote Bluegrass Highway, getting ready to turn off on Interstate 65 South. Sorry, excuse me. Runny nose. Heading towards Nashville. I just made a drop, and I am going to pick up a load at 4 o'clock in the morning on Sunday. And I'm going to mosey down here, spend the night, and then I'm going to find a museum somewhere around Nashville tomorrow. That's my big plan. But I was saying that the PBY Catalina, the plant was huge, and they expanded it, and there was a real fear the Japanese were going to launch bombers, and attack Southern California. And they made a giant net that went over the entire plant that looked like a photograph of a residential neighborhood. If you flew over and looked down, it looked like houses and cars and stuff. They literally covered it with made it look like nothing. It's kind of interesting. So the plant expanded, and the only choke point to the production was the leak test. They would literally push the planes into a swimming pool-ish and let it sit for a period of time, overnight, whatever, see if water leaked in anywhere. So that was the last test before the planes got sent out, and that was the choke point. So somebody said, we need to make a bigger pool. So they got the blueprints to make this gigantic swimming pool. They were going to do all this construction to put a net over it. And they had the blueprints ready for it. They did kind of a recreation of it on the documentary the wife and I watched. And they show a film. It's supposed to be black and white. It's supposed to be an old film. And it's all scratchy. And it shows these engineers hold the blueprints and point and gesturing. And some guy goes by with a broom, kind of looks over their shoulder. He says something. He walks off with the broom. And it turns out that guy said, why don't you just get a garden hose and put water inside the plane and see if it falls out? And if it doesn't, pull the drain plug to let the water out. They all just kind of looked over their shoulder and threw the blueprints up in the air because that's what they ended up doing. But long-range reconnaissance, you got to remember, nowadays you use satellite. Satellite tracks everything, and you have long-range radar. You have listening devices under the ocean. There's all kinds of technology. But back then, it was you got to see with your own eyeballs. And the problem with that then is do it by a boat. That's fine, but you can't go fast enough in a boat. Kind of limited. And they did have a group of people they called coast watchers. And these are guys that lived on the islands in the South Pacific that slowly got set up. And you got to remember this guy's a hurry. You got to remember the technology of the day. A radio wasn't a cell phone like we have now. A radio generator and a power generator weighed something like 300 pounds. So you had to have this big, heavy-duty, elaborate system to make radio calls. But these guys used to sit on these little islands and they'd hide. And they would make broadcasts where they'd see aircraft or ships go by. And like the Battle of Guadalcanal, the coast watchers would say, okay, I've got 16 Betty bombers passing over right now at 10,000 feet. So Henderson Field on Guadalcanal knew an hour later they were going to show up so they could time when they took off to intercept. And they'd shoot some of them up and then they would leave. And then the coast watchers would report, okay, there's 9 of them going back. So if 16 came over and 9 went back, you could do the math and tell how much damage you did. It was kind of a cool idea. But out in the open water, you can't see from an island. So that's where the PBYs came in. And they flew all over the South Pacific. They also picked up downed airmen. People been shot down in the water and shipwrecked people occasionally. And one of the missions they did, there was a group called the Black Cats. And these guys exclusively flew at night. That was their full-time gig. And what they would do would go to harass the Japanese because they had a few major bases in the South Pacific. And they're doing work, they're doing construction, they're doing retrofits, they're digging holes, they're fixing broken stuff. So they got their place lit up. The Americans aren't anywhere near them, so they would have their lights on at night. And these guys would fly over, and they'd hear the plane coming, usually, and they would turn the lights off. So they'd sit there in the dark, and they would stop what they were doing. So their job was just to get in the way, to cause problems. And they would equip these guys. Well, they had 2 types of explosives. They had incendiary, and they had basically grenades, and then little incendiaries that cause fires. So they would kind of estimate where the Japanese were, where the base was, and they would toss these little bombs out the blisters. So they'd have 200 of these things on the floor. And they would just loiter over the base all night long in the dark because there was really no night air-to-air combat going on. They'd loiter around. And they'd throw these bombs out. Usually more times than not, they would accomplish nothing with the bomb, but it would stop the Japanese from doing whatever it is they were trying to do. Other times they would come in at a higher altitude and pull the throttles back and glide down and go over and then throw a whole bunch of them because they didn't hear them coming. Other times they would fly by, drop a few bombs and leave and fly away for 10 or 15 minutes, then come back. And by that time they'd get the lights turned back on and go back to work, and they'd show up again. Or they'd fly to another base, fly 100 miles over there and bomb a base and hang around, and then come back to that one, drop a few grenades and a few bombs and start a fire, break some stuff, keep them from sleeping, keep them from getting their job done, and then go back. Before the sun came up, they'd go back and, refit and go out the next night. It was just harassment. It's H&I, harassment, interdiction, just cause problems. But every once in a while, they would have a great success. They would mix up the operation, but every once in a while, you drop a bomb or you drop an incendiary, and there would be a secondary explosion, which means you hit something. And once you caught something on fire, it would light the area up, and then they would start concentrating their little tiny bombs just to cause problems. And And that was literally the unit. You probably find some history of that if that interests you. But it's the Catalina PBY Catalina Black Cats, full-time nighttime harassment bombing raids. And there is a famous got a guy coming up behind me here. What do you want, dude? I'm in the right lane. Uh, you've heard the story of the Indianapolis. That was the cruiser that delivered the atomic components to Tinian during the war. Dropped off the components and left. It got sunk by a Japanese submarine. It was like the last capital ship lost by the Americans in World War II. It was like a couple weeks before the war ended. Hey, what's up, Butters? And they were cruising in a straight line in the fog, and they popped out of the fog, and there was a Japanese submarine that just happened to be right there, literally lined up, fired a bunch of torpedoes, and the ship sank. And the guys ended up in the water. They made movies about this, and it was shark-infested waters, and they floated around for 3 days. And I think 600 people ended up in the water, and I think half of them got eaten or died or both. Hey, Hassan, what's up, mister? And it was just the structure that was in place. The ship was supposed to arrive at a certain port. Oh, you keep missing? Sorry. I was home for about a week, and I stopped doing these because I don't really know how to run a live when I'm sitting at home, not driving. So I didn't do any for 6 days, but now I'm back out here doing it. But these the rules back then with the Navy is you have a capital ship. When they would go to port, you wouldn't report its arrival because you didn't want the enemy to somehow find out about it. Well, you don't report its arrival, but you don't report its non-arrival. So the ship didn't show up, and nobody said anything because there's not a procedure for that. And it wasn't until a few days later they realized, hey, this ship was supposed to be here the other day and didn't show up. And a PBY Catalina was out flying around. Mind you, 600 people. It's a little vacation once in a while. You're just on the couch. Yeah, I come out here usually about 3 weeks. Then I go home for a week and I say, hey, I need a trip back to Texas. And it kind of got screwed up this time. I was out here 3 or 4 weeks, and the wife was supposed to come meet me in New York, and then the airline screwed that whole thing up, and she didn't make it. So that was going to be our time off, was hanging out together out there, but that exploded in my face. So then I went back to work for a couple more weeks, and I said, okay, I need a trip back to the house. Then I went home, and the cats looked at me like, who are you? What are you doing? It was weird how the cats takes them a day to realize, oh, I recognize your voice. But yeah, I was home for a while, and I went back on the clock Monday last week, and Houston's not a super hot area for outgoing cargo, so I went on the clock Monday, nothing happened. Actually, we went on Sunday night. I didn't get a call. And then Tuesday, I got a call. They gave me a run up here by Memphis, and I've been out here running around since. But what's going on right now is I made a drop up here in Kentucky, and it was like 5:30 in the afternoon, and it's a Friday, which is a horrible time to go back on the board. And I clicked the button, went back on the board, and it said, you're number 5 of 5, which means the chances of me getting a load are non-existent. And I don't want to spend the weekend sitting around here staring at the walls. So I said, where do I need to go to get a load? This is why I'm making this live. And they said, we have 4 loads. I got lost in Kentucky on Man o' War, Luke. That's funny. But I called dispatch directly and I said, okay, where do I have to go to get a load? And they said, I got 4 loads coming out of Antioch, Tennessee, Sunday. And she's trying to scrape bodies together. And I said, put me on that. And it's 150 miles down here. And it's a 375-mile delivery starting at 4 or 5 in the morning on Sunday. And she says, I'll pay you for all miles, which is freaking awesome. So remember that if they are ever scrambling, if you're way down the priority list, call and ask that question. Where do I got to go to get a run? And she comes up quickly with, I need to find 4 bodies for Sunday. I mean, said, I'm getting paid well to drive down there, and they get paid well to do the load. So I know I have tomorrow off, and I'm going to be around Nashville. And when I get up here and stop for the evening, I'm going to try to find a museum, either a military museum or an aviation museum. It's kind of my thing, too. But back at the Catalina, so the Indianapolis gets sunk. These guys are in the water. No one's even looking for them because they don't know they're missing. 600 guys in the water, half of them die in the water ultimately. The PBY Catalina is flying over, not looking for people. And they had a problem with one of their antennas, which apparently was inside the aircraft. And the guy crawled into the belly of the aircraft and was looking straight down. He had a headset on, and he's looking straight down. And he sees oil trails because the tail wheel is open, and he's looking straight down. He sees oil trails, but he has a headset on. He goes, "Hey, I'm seeing oil below us," and they turn around and they see heads bobbing in the water. And that's something. If you ever find yourself floating in the ocean with a group of people, don't just float around in a clump. Make a shape. Hold on to each other's arms. Make a circle. Make something that's distinctive. That makes you stand out with sea. Veteran with a sign lives down Tennessee. He's been to a few museums. All right, you got any idea where? James Jones, hello. I've been busy. Oh, I get that. Yeah, this expediting job, it's kind of boom or bust. Sometimes you're sitting there for a day or two and you're twiddling your thumbs, and it's like, come on. Other times I get a load in here and I'm driving 400 miles. And you get 200 miles into the drive, and all of a sudden you get a call. Hey, what time are you going to be there? I don't know, 2 o'clock. Okay, at 3 o'clock, we got a pickup for you to turn around and go back the other direction. Like, oh, cool. Knoxville. Okay, I'm not going near Knoxville this time. They say, all right, cool. Then I stop and I'm unloading into welding. All right, that's cool. I'm unloading the load of my phone rings. I'm like, yeah, what's up? And he goes, are you loading? Yeah. Okay, you got that next pickup? Yeah. Okay, after you drop that one, we got one for you to run tonight. And I start looking at my watch. I'm like, dude, I got to sleep sometime here. I think he's in around Knoxville or somewhere close by. Yeah, Knoxville, that's where, no pun intended, that's where Fort Knox is located. And I actually have, if you go into my playlist, I have things in there called the Scenic Route or Off the Beaten Path or something like that. I like to walk into museums and film, and I don't want to say I narrate, but I narrate because I have a military background and I'm into military history. So more or less, I know what I'm looking at when I'm looking at it. So I talk about it and talk about little bits and pieces of it. James, you're a welder. That's cool. That's one of those jobs I'm jealous of. I knew a guy that he welded 2 aluminum cans together, and I went, dude, how do you get the perfect temperature pressure to put 2 aluminum cans together? James. So that PBY sees these guys in the water, makes a radio call, calls all the recovery people, look them help, and they landed. And they threw every floating thing they had in the water to get people out of the water, took as many bodies into the aircraft that they could carry, and then had everybody else get on top of the aircraft. They just had bodies, just using it as a floating barge, and they stayed there overnight until ships showed up the next day to save these guys. But it was just by mere happenstance. He was looking straight down when they passed over it. It's like, what are the odds? And I took, since I used to fly out in the Gulf, I used to fly helicopters out there, I had to go to a water survival course. And one of the things they taught us, they throw you in a pool so you get to practice stuff. You're in the water with a group of people, you get into a circle and you lock arms. And whichever way you're looking, that's the part of the sky you need to record. You're looking straight ahead. The guy across from you is looking over your head. And you're linking arms, and you're keeping a tight thing, keeping a circle, keeping a bundle. Sharks aren't really an issue out in the Gulf, out off the coast of Louisiana or Texas. But if a shark is an issue, I can tell you this: sharks don't go after clusters; they go after individuals. So if you're all in a tight group, and there's one guy swimming way over there, that's the one the shark's going to go after. That's just how they do their thing. So if you stay in a clump, it kind of they're not as attracted to that. So I'm just going to make up a number. You got 15 people floating in the ocean. Your ship sank, your aircraft went down, whatever it is. You're all in your life vests and you're in the water. You're linking arms. You're in a circle, and the guy across from you says, I see an aircraft. At that point, everybody makes the circle bigger. You back off, you hold hands, you lay flat on your back, and you start kicking your feet. And you make a water plume. You have a perfect circle with a water plume. It looks like you're at the fountains in Las Vegas. So if somebody's looking out the windows trying to pick out something interesting, searching, and all of a sudden they see this plume of water, believe you me, it's going to get their attention. That's just something to think about. If you ever find yourself in that position, make yourself a shape. These guys didn't do this. The guys, they were just floating around, however. But again, nobody was looking for them either, so that kind of sucked. Oh, then I got people coming up behind me in a big hurry tonight. I'm over in the right lane, keeping out of everybody's way, and they're all out here hauling ass. Anyway, I'm heading south. I'm heading southeast as we speak. I'll pull into a Pilot or Flying J, probably north of town, and I will sit on my little computer, and sit back here and find what kind of museums are available. It's be Saturday, which is perfect. And I'm either going to look for a military WS-10. Hi, what's WS-10 stand for? Out of curiosity. Yeah, coming over, coming over. Oh, and I got to find a Wally World. I have electronics in this van. I mean, as I'm sitting here, I have my GPS satellite. I have my phone. I have a radar detector. Don't really need it, but I have it. I have a fan plugged in, hanging from the visor. I have alternate plugs charging up small batteries. Down here between the seats, I have a big battery that's charging, and I have a CB radio. So I have all this electronic. Oh, and I have a dash cam here. I have all this electronics, and I have a 12 volt in this dash cubby and another 12 volt down here next to me. The one in the dash cubby, I plug in it splices into a 3 set, and that thing went bad. So I've had to scavenge power to make everything work. And the only thing that's not working is my dash camera, which I kind of like having. So I got to find a Wally World and find another plug to put in here to split the power, because that one, when I unplugged it, it was hot. And I just don't think it was a very good quality setup. So I need to get another one, because I got a lot of stuff in here charging going down the road. And when I'm shut down, I throw my solar panels outside and keep on charging. But yeah, that's another thing I got to do today or tomorrow. Let's see here, I've got 22.1 miles per gallon. WS10, where are you tuning in from? I don't think I've ever seen one here before. I call this part of my channel Expediting America. I am an expediter, which is truck driving in a box van, but without all the regulations truck drivers have to deal with, which makes this fairly simple. And we don't have limitations on drive times, and we don't have problems finding parking spaces. It's a lot easier. And I am currently deadheading, getting paid, but deadheading for a pickup for Sunday morning, and I think it's 4 o'clock in the morning. Is the time frame they gave me. And I've lost everybody. That sucks. My conversation is so tantalizing, nobody's here. Do Butters. It's South Park when I see that. I always tell women like to leave hints. Women like to drop clues for guys. So one small problem. Guys don't do clues. Guys don't do hints. You don't tell a guy, he's not going to figure it out. Sorry. Don't mean to be brutal, but guys don't do that. You don't speak in clues and hints. So women speak in. Uh, I got about 50 miles to go to Chattanooga. And I'm going to stop there or a rest area close to that, and I'm going to come up with a plan. Flashlights. I'm going to stop there and keep on going. Time's 6:30 local. I don't even know what time zone I'm in. I should figure that out. I think I jumped time zones to do this drop, but I don't remember because I don't pay that much attention. This guy getting pushy. I stay over in the right lane and I set my cruise on 62. People come up behind me and get a case of the ass because I'm not going 102. That's why I'm in the right lane. American Cave Museum. Kentucky down. What is the? Oh, the Mammoth Caves. I've been there back in 1986. There it is. That sign on the right. Mammoth Cave National Park. In 1986, I went to basic training in Fort Knox, and they brought us there. And if you're ever in Kentucky, check out the Mammoth Caves. It's worth the underground tour. And in 22, the wife and I came up here to do a podcast. And we were driving home, and we were on this highway, and I saw that sign. I went, "Oh, I remember that." So we spent the night, and I took her through the cave system also, which was kind of cool. We enjoyed that. Mammoth Caves, it was a water aqueduct, natural underground, that's been gone for a zillion years. And apparently, like in 1860, some guy was out bear hunting and he shot a bear and he hit it, but it took off and he chased it. And he found this giant hole in the ground where the ground had given way. It got into this underground network, and it goes on for hundreds of miles down to the ground. And they hollowed out, not hollowed out, but they cleaned up sections so you can walk through it. It's called Mammoth Caves here in Kentucky. Definitely worth the tour. Recommend doing it in the summertime because it'll be hot, miserable, and sticky. But as soon as you start going down into that hole, it's like an air conditioner blowing in your face. It's nice and dry and cool underground. Take a jacket. It's a neat adventure to go down there and look around. They show you where they used to mine some kind of mineral that they used to make ammunition during the multiple wars. They could get it from down there. There's some remains where Indians had been down in there and chiseling and marking the walls or doing things. It's kind of a neat piece of history. Definitely worth the trip. Lights on. Double check. Ooh, getting sleepy for some reason. I actually slept good last night. It's tongue and whole hair. Anywho, this is I-65 southbound in Kentucky. We're about mid-state here. I know what that sound is. My radar's making noise. Let's see what we got up here. Nothing. He's around. Oh, he's around. Yeah, I gotta find a Wally World today. Uh, called the wife and told her what was going on, so it was kind of exciting. But like I said, tomorrow my objective is to find a museum, and depending on the setup, I'll probably live stream that. That's my form of entertainment. Anybody got a question? Anybody got a topic? Anybody want to tell me where they're from? I'm always curious where people tune in from. It seems like when I go live in the middle of the night, which I've done a few times, I get people from New Zealand and Great Britain. I had one guy from Berlin on here, which I thought was kind of cool. There we go. One for before Bowling Green 49. That might be my destination. I'm kind of getting tired. Come on over, mister. Come on over. Choo, choo. It's a lot of traffic for late on a Friday because we're kind of in the middle of nowhere. If you're ever driving around on the interstates, if you want to be safe from police traps and speed traps, two things you need to do. One's free, one isn't. Is run the Waze app, WAZE. It's a navigation. It's like Google Maps kind of, but it's got more information on it. And it also tags police cars, which you can participate in tagging and untagging. And run a radar detector. You don't have to get a super fancy one, but get one that's programmable. And radar detectors pick up X, K, and Ka band. When I say programmable, turn off the X, turn off the K. We just leave the Ka band because that's literally, you know Garfield. Got a gift. Don't know Garfield. Sorry. You literally, it'll be quiet. The radar detector will be quiet. If you have X and K going, it's going to go off all the time. Those aren't rare. Well, X is never the police, but K is rarely. So just run Ka band, and that radar detector will sit there for a week and not say a noise. And then all of a sudden it lights up, it'll get your attention. And that's what you heard a second ago was Ka band, which means he's somewhere out here. I don't speed, I just like to know who's where, what's going on around me. Well, I mean, I have sped in the past. I don't speed, I'm in a van. Got to save money on gas. Wow, I've driven 400 miles today. Jeez. I just looked, I filled up this morning. I still have over a quarter tank, and I have 401 miles on this tank. Oof. Usually Leah Liz is on here, but I don't see her. So the the PBY Catalina was the reconnaissance aircraft, and everybody in the world wanted them. All the Allied countries were ordering those things. They used them up in about the 1950s, and the technology changed. They went to a solid metal constructed aircraft, and then radar took over, and then eventually satellites took over. They got retired. There's very few of them left in the world. They're in private hands. There's a couple in some museums, but they're kind of rare. But for its time, it was an incredibly important aircraft with an insanely long range. And I just didn't realize how old the technology was. I thought it was a World War II construct. It was operational 5 years before, almost 6 years before we got into the war. And that kind of surprised me because pre-war fighter planes like the P-36P Shooter, the P-40 Warhawk, those, and the Vindicator, the torpedo bomber, were garbage compared to the mid-late war planes of a year or two later because the technology didn't jump. There was a torpedo bomber, was a piece of junk. It was called, the official name was a Vindicator. It was so bad, it was so slow, the crews called it a wind indicator. And it was a piece of junk. And then they came out with the Avenger. The Avenger was the torpedo bomber that was operational during the war that was very successful. That's what George Bush 41 flew, was the Avenger. It was a rather large airplane for its time. It had a pilot in the front, you had a radio operator, or you had a gunner that sat behind you in a little enclosed turret, and then in the belly there was a door, and there was a radio operator and a guy that fired a weapon downward from the back of the plane, a defensive weapon. Those the Avengers, Flight 19 out of Florida. Remember the one in the tail end of 1945 after the war that disappeared, like the first planes that disappeared, the Bermuda Triangle? That's what those were, Avengers. And what's one of the freaky things about that Flight 19 thing? The crew, it's a 3-man crew, and the radio operator guy that got in the belly had to be helped in. Somebody had to physically, he put on his, life vest and everything, his parachute, whatever he had on, and he would grab the door open and he'd grab the handles, and somebody had to physically shove the person into the airplane. So Flight 19 goes out, does its thing, and the planes disappear, and it's the first official aircraft loss of Bermuda Triangle. And they make a list of all the people who died, who disappeared, and one of the crew members is standing there in formation. They go, wait a minute. He goes, no, I was sick on that day. It was the guy on the belly out of one of those planes. And they said, who took your place? He says, I don't know. And they went and found the crew chief, and they said, did you shove the guy in the compartment? He said, yeah. Well, who was it? And he goes, I don't know. He had his flight helmet on. I didn't see his face. I pushed him in though. So the crew chief physically put somebody into that belly compartment, and nobody to this day knows who it was. There's nobody missing off post or off the airbase, but there was somebody in the belly of that plane when it disappeared, and they lost to history, whoever it was. So that's just one more freaky thing to go along with that. Mammoth Cave National Park. That's a sign coming up on the right there. Definitely worth a look. See. Yeah, the wife and I were there April of 22. I know it's April because it's nice and comfortable in April in Texas, and we came up to Ohio and it was freezing. And we were wearing summer clothes. And believe you me, that doesn't work. I had to buy a jacket for my wife. I went to Walmart, no jackets at Walmart. Next door was a Kohl's. I go into Kohl's, no jackets in Kohl's. Other side of the parking lot, there was a Burlington coat factory. And guess what they didn't have? They had a clearance rack in the back, and I found exactly one jacket in that entire store that would work for what we needed. There was only a handful on that rack, and I got it. I'm glad we did. Jeez, because it got cold. My wife needed one. We went on the trip up. We stopped at the museum, the big science history museum in Chicago that has the U-505 submarine. That was the one that was actually captured at sea, and it was outside as a display. You could go in it. And then the weather got to it, so they brought it indoors and put a roof over it and restored it. It's absolutely beautiful. And you can go in it, and they walk you through it and give you a tour. And then we went to Cleveland, and there's the USS Cod, which is an American submarine from the war. And I tell you what, it is arm and leg difference between the U-boat and the American submarine. It's mind-boggling how different that design idea was. Because the German submarine is tiny and cramped with one little skinny hull. And I mean, if you held your arm left and right, you could touch everything in the sub going through it, person or anything. Whereas the American submarine, it was wider with there's actually rooms off to the left to the right. You'd have to turn some corners and stuff. Where the German, the U-boat's just a straight line. Very crowded, very small. And it was a Type 9 U-boat. The Type 7 was the smaller one. But the Type 7 was more common. So the 9 was the quote unquote big one. Yeah, okay. All right. I'm officially pulling into this rest area. I'm going to look at my map. I'm going to refill my water bottles because I haven't had a chance to do that today. Downshifting. Whoa, reel in these horses. Reel them in. Reel them in. Here we go. It must be full on that side because the truck's already bleeding over here. So I'm going to go take a break here for a few. Like I said, I'm in no rush. I don't have to do a pickup until Sunday, and it's Friday. Kentucky has nice rest areas. If you come through here late enough, there'll be a whole dump truck load of trucks over here. Ooh. Roll up here, take out my trash, and do all that stuff. All right. Okay, I'll let you guys go for tonight. Like I said, if I get to a good museum, I'm going to film that tomorrow, but I got to find out where I'm going. I'll catch up with you guys later.